Today we're going to look at the Cambridge MXN10. It's a network streamer that sells for €400, and we're going to examine it with only one side-by-side comparison, and we're going to use music that you would read about on Rolling Stone, on Pitchfork, and on The Guardian.
This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest. With products to fill every need and prices to suit every budget, AudioQuest is made for you. Visit audioquest.com for more information.
Now before we start, how about some ambient techno from 1993? Now this isn't Global Communications' magnum opus, that's 7614. This is a lesser known album of Chapter House remixes from 93. It's called Pentamerous Metamorphosis, quite a mouthful. And it's far more Global Communication than it is Chapter House. In fact, there are 0 guitars on this record, and I think it sounds like a cross between Vangelis and Bowler. Now this particular version is the blue splattered vinyl edition from Music on Vinyl, which came out in 2020. But yes, in case you want to know, I do have the Warp box set that came out a year later because I am that much of a Global Communication nerd. Anyway, this video has come about because I was forced to connect the MXN10 to the NAD M66 digital streaming preamplifier after a Blue OS firmware update took the NAD off my Google Home network, and I didn't have the time to do any network troubleshooting, and I still don't because I'm not in Portugal for very long on this trip. Anyway, audio streams arrive at the MXN10 over Ethernet or Wi-Fi, and the screw-on aerials ensure, from my experience at least anyway, a robust connection, because I've experienced no dropouts and no drop-offs during just over a week's solid use. Now, what I do like about this unit is its 4 front panel click buttons, which give us quick access to our favorite playlists or internet radio stations. So for me, having BBC 6 Music a click away, a single click away in fact, is useful for when I don't know what I want to listen to and I want somebody else to decide that for me. Now thankfully, the MXN10 supports every streaming protocol served up by the NAD M66. So we're talking about Apple AirPlay 2, Spotify Connect, Tidal Connect, and Roon Ready. But the Cambridge unit also gives us the bonus of Google Cast, which used to be called Google Chromecast, and that makes lighter work for me of SoundCloud streams. You just click and go. And lately I've been digging DJ mixes from Richie Hawtin and Steffi. And inside the accompanying Stream Magic app we can add Cobas or Deezer, but I don't use either of those services. Neither would I ever use the USB-A socket on the back that permits streaming from a directly attached storage device, a USB drive. Now, why wouldn't I ever use that? Well, in this house, Roon streams any locally stored files over the network. So a hard drive of songs is attached to the MacBook Pro in my office upstairs. And on that MacBook Pro, I've pointed the Roon software app to that hard drive full of songs. So I guess we call that my Roon server. Now back down here, when I'm sat on the couch over there, Roon Remote on my smartphone then tells that server in the office what songs to send to the Cambridge device, which is behind me. And putting the now playing information on the TV, because I get asked about this a lot, is a third-party Apple TV app called TV Remote. So it pulls cover art and metadata from the Roon server and sends it out over HDMI to my TV. And I would like to thank Roon for sponsoring this video. Now, the MXN10's analog outputs are fed by a DAC circuit that's built around an ESS Labs Sabre ES9033Q chip. But owners of third-party outboard DACs will want to know about the Cambridge's Toslink and coax outputs, but there are no coax and Toslink inputs on this unit. And I've got to say, it's a real joy to be using something so simple after spending the last few weeks putting the WiiM Ultra through its paces. So the MXN10's looks and functionality are what we might call understated. However, if we sit the MXN10 next to the similarly priced Ultra, we might see the Cambridge box as functionally bereft. So here's everything that the Cambridge offers that the WiiM does not. Apple AirPlay 2. And here's everything that the WiiM offers that the Cambridge does not. So we're talking about HDMI ARC, a USB DAC output, a Toslink input, a coax input, touchscreen control with presets access, a volume and click wheel, pre-amplifier functionality, which you might be able to get on the Cambridge, but I'm not sure about that. It might be in the WebMin web menu. Anyway, also on the WiiM, we get a subwoofer output with bass management. We get room correction software via a parametric EQ. We even get squeeze light support, and coming soon is, I think, Plex amp support. So I don't wish to labour the point, but the functionality scales are heavily tipped in the WiiM's favour. So the only thing that can save the MXN10 from WiiM-induced oblivion is its sound quality. So we have to ask, does our BritBox sound better or worse than the Chinese rival? And the only way to know for sure is to listen for ourselves, and in my case, do a side-by-side comparison. So I didn't have a WiiM Ultra here a week or so ago when I got here, so I had to buy one at very short notice from Amazon Spain. Thankfully, it arrived the next day. Now, its DAC circuit is built around an ESS9038 Q2M chip. Now, I say this not to spark some kind of spec sheet battle, but to remind people that the DAC chip is only one ingredient in the DAC circuit. So also in that DAC circuit that influences heavily the sound quality of what we hear is the power supply and the analog output stage. So it's a real futile exercise to say, oh, that DAC has that chip and that DAC has that chip, therefore blah, 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 because we don't know anything really about the power supply or the analog output stage. Now, addressing any would-be nitpickers among you, yes, the A/B tests here were level matched, but I generally spent one day with the Cambridge and then the next day with the WiiM, and then back to the Cambridge and then back to the WiiM, and I did this for about a week. And no, the WiiM's various DAC filter settings don't really affect my overall findings here. Their seasoning isn't as strong as the DAC's own flavour. And as always, nothing is getting destroyed or blown out of the water, even through what I think is a fairly high-end hi-fi system. You can see a bit of it behind me. I've got a pair of GoldenEar T66, but what you can't see is that they are being driven by an ENLEUM AMP or AMP 23R. Okay, so Nicholas Jar's Too Many Kids Finding Rain in the Dust is one of my go-to low-end test tracks. And I hear its bass line as slightly fuller and fleshier through the MXN10 than the Ultra. And a lot of people are talking about Oasis right now. And the band has just issued a 30th anniversary edition of their debut album, Definitely Maybe. But my favourite Oasis album is the B-sides compilation called The Master Plan. And my favourite track on The Master Plan is It's Good to Be Free. Now, frustratingly, that song can sound, a little bit unpleasant on weaker hardware. Now, neither of the two DACs that we're considering today is weak, but I think the MXN10 keeps the Oasis cut just the right side of listenable, but on the WiiM, the treble makes me wince and I'm kind of forced to turn the volume down a bit. And yes, I am being super nitpicky here. And the MXN10's more organic take on music shows up again on There's Another Boy Drowning, which is from the Shades of Blue EP. And on that track, Matt Johnson's rhythm guitar can sound a little more gossamery when heard through the WiiM. That said, the WiiM's lighter and airier treble is better suited to the ultra clinical, the uber clinical Glitchtronica made by Gabor Lazar. Now let's go back to the 90s to American Music Club's frankly epic Mercury, where Mitchell Froome's production job is just on another level. Now on this album, I noted how the Ultra makes the cymbals sound drier and more papery than the Cambridge. And it's a similar story with Talk Talk's Newgrass, that I think, well, it sounds like that track is ice skating on the sound of cymbal shimmer. And I think we need a richer sounding amplifier, a bit like the Hagel H590, to properly counterbalance the WiiM's slightly thinner and reedier sound. And I wouldn't say that about the Cambridge, which to me seems to have just the right tonal balance to suit the ENLEUM AMP or AMP 23R. So yeah, I would say that the Cambridge MXN10 edges out the WiiM Ultra on sound quality. It sounds more substantial and more liquid than the WiiM. Now that's not by a huge amount, but it is enough to remark upon in this video. So if you like this video, you know what to do, and hit us up on Patreon if you'd like the playlists for this video and every other video we've made since 2020. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Whereas the Cambridge, because it's its center of musical gravity is lower. Okay, that's good. What about you?